don't know if we do that. Because how many of you have gone to Victory Church in the Philippines? Where's the tithe envelope? In the seat. Nobody stands there and gives you tithe envelope. It's on the seat. And if perhaps that was the case, why include all other people in the church and all the church in the world? Right? That's a problem. We have a problem with people. And sometimes the people who have problem with people are the problems themselves. Right? A positive-minded person will look for a solution. But listen, I read something to this effect. That a negative-minded person will always find a problem with a solution. Did you get that? That's a negative-minded person. Will always find a problem with whatever solution you found. I have a problem with that. Really? So what you do? I don't know, but I have a problem with your suggestion. Oh my goodness. Proverbs 14:31, jealousy, envy. The Bible tells us jealousy is like a cancer. It spreads, it kills, it can infect, and every year, you have churches that are either nominating or voting for particular people would serve. And there are those sometimes that could make a big thing out of it and they would get hurt. There's people who leave the church because they were not voted as an officer. There's people who leave the church because it's been serving in that committee for a long time, now it's booted out and replaced by somebody. So I know this, I'm in this field, for a long, long time, and I know this so well, and now you're replacing me. Well, give others a chance, amen? Yeah, I was once a choir member. But I don't feel bad that I'm not part of the choir anymore because I have other things to do. For a long time I was part of the choir. I was part of the praise and worship band as well, playing bass. I don't feel bad that somebody else plays bass. But our attitude should be like, thank God we have other people to do it. Amen? Thank God that other people are helping. Thank God there's young generations that are stepping up and are growing and whatever, gifts they have, and they're developing it and they're using it for God's glory. So don't feel bad. If there might be some changes, if there might be some flexibility that is required, if you have the right heart and the right attitude, thank God. You know what? I thank God that I'm preaching this message and we don't have problems like that right now. Because if there is, maybe you say, oh, pastor is preaching and targeting this. No, but thank God, right? Amen? Because, we just need to learn now. I'd rather, how do you put it? I'd rather be proactive than remedial. You know what I mean by that? That I'm not going to wait until something happens and then, that's the time to preach this. No. If this is a lesson that we can learn from this text, then learn it now. So that we can be prevented from having an attitude, right? Or a mentality that might be carnal, that might be selfish, that might be born out of jealousy or envy, that may be rooted on what you call pride. As a matter of fact, and you look at the letter of John, in 3 John in verse 19, speaking of the author piece, a man who loves to be the leader, refuses to have anything to do with us, John says. But if you go to verse 10, it says, when I come, I will report some of the things he is doing and the evil accusation he is making against us. Not only does he refuse to welcome the traveling teachers, he also tells others not to help them. And when they do help, he puts them out of the church. Dear friend, in verse 11, don't let this bad example influence you. Follow only what is good. Remember that those who do good prove that they are God's children. Amen? If you are a child of God, then it is expected that you do good. That you pursue what is good. And then shun evil. But there will always be somebody or one who would want to run things and would want to be the top, who would want to have the preeminence, like I'm the boss, I call the shots, I make decisions. It's all about self. And what's the third thing that we learned here? So there was pride, there was people problem, and the third thing is what I call perception problem. In verse number 22, here's what we were told. But Jesus answered and said, you know not what you ask. You don't understand what you're asking for. You know the saying, be careful what you wish for, right? See, so, are you able to drink of the cup that I shall drink of, and to be baptized with the baptism that I'm baptized with? They say unto him, what did they say? We're able. Really? So you find that these people that now we're looking at the whole story, right? You can look at it with the whole perspective. But if you were one of them, and Jesus was talking about the cup that he would have to drink, they didn't understand what it was. But what was it really? You know what the cup means? The cup that he was talking about? It's the cup of death. And what's involved in dying there is all kinds of mockery and humiliation, all kinds of torment or torture, physical, mental, emotional, right? They ripped his flesh apart, they put a crown of thorns, plucked his beard off his face, smacked him and kicked him and punched him. They didn't understand what they're wishing for. They didn't understand what they're talking about. It's like Peter. Can I do that too? Walk in the water. Really? You really want to do that? And he did. Of course, he got scared, and you know the rest of the story. So let's look for a moment at Jesus' response to the request of James and John. How did Jesus handle this? He says, you don't even know what you're asking for. You don't realize what you're talking. He then asked, can you drink of the cup that I shall drink of? You want to sit on my right, you want to sit on my left. Can you drink of the cup that I shall drink of? That's the answer. What's their response? Sure, no problem. We'll do anything, just make me, sit in the right or the left and have that prominent seat there in eternity. Can you imagine what they're talking about, what they're wishing for? So this was actually, when Jesus talked about the cup, he talked about, like in a figurative sense, right? Referencing what? Calamities and judgment, desolation and isolation. That was a time when Jesus cried, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? He was isolated from heaven. And Jesus was saying to them in essence, in a way, that I am going to experience all kinds of sufferings that you cannot imagine. All kinds of things that you will not be able to bear. Right? So are you able to go through it too? Because they don't know what they're talking about. So Jesus was headed to Calvary. And they don't have the proper perspective or perception of it. A lot of times this is where we make mistakes. We hear a story and our perception is that this is it. But you haven't heard the rest of the story. And hook, line, and sinker, you absorb it, believe it, and you make conclusion out of it. You heard only one side of the story, that's it. You never heard the other side of the story. So now you're angry. You know what I'm talking about? Have you been a victim of it? Have you been a part of it? Probably. Because we love to hear stories. If there's a song that says, I love to tell the story, there's also the truth about I love to hear some stories. Right? Because if you talk about other things, then people are not interested. But if you start with, hey, come here, I want to tell you something. But please, promise me don't tell anyone else. So if a person starts talking to you like that, tell me honestly. You want to know. Out of curiosity. But then as you hear the story, you didn't hear the other side, and you make a conclusion, you're also angry at this person. If I tell you a story like this, for example, you know what happened? There's this little girl in one room, and she was by herself. And 4 guys came in and took her out of the room, brought her to another room, and she was crying, she was resisting, and they put her to sleep. And the next thing they did, they cut her open. See, that's one side of the story. If I tell you, that's a surgery. They took her from her. See? They took her from her room, brought her to the OR. There were 4 men, the doctors, they cut her open. That looks bad. But you only heard one side of the story. You know what I mean? If you're not paying attention, to the whole matter, you're not listening to the voice of God, you're one-sided, you make the wrong decision. And a lot of times you make that decision based on what? Your own wrong perception of things. And that's when you're not listening to